Good evening and welcome to the New York Society Library. My name is Sayer Holliday. I'm from the library's events staff, and I am just here briefly to welcome you and offer a couple of points of business. As we begin, we acknowledge that the library stands on traditional lands of the Lenape people and other indigenous peoples to whom we pay respect. If you are new to the library, we are celebrating our 270th anniversary this year. Thank you. In addition to our large collection of books and other materials, beautiful reading spaces like this one, children's library, and other services, we offer a full season of events with authors and other presenters, so do take a look at what's coming up. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge our season event sponsors, Polymath Educational Services, providing personalized support for teens with learning differences. You can find information about their services by the handout over here and on the door of this room. And if I can ask you to silence your phone or anything that might disturb tonight's conversation, that would be great. As you may know, mysteries and thrillers are a strong and much read part of this library's collection and have been for decades, back to Arthur Conan Doyle through Agatha Christie and right up to S.J. Rozan and current authors like those with us this evening. So we are particularly delighted to co-present this event with Sisters in Crime. I will now hand the presentation over to Sisters in Crime's chapter co-president, Nina Mansfield. Thank you, and enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nina Mansfield, one of the co-presidents of the New York Tri-State chapter of Sisters in Crime. I'd like to send regrets from our other co-president, Lori Robin. She really regrets that she can't be here, but would like to thank everybody who has sent well wishes and gifts for her recovery. And welcome to our launch of the Murder New York Style 6 anthology, New York State of Crime. Before we get started, we have a few quick chapter announcements. For our chapter members, our holiday party is scheduled for Wednesday, December 11th. Members, please look for information in your inboxes this weekend. Immediately after this event, we'll be having a dinner at Pig Heaven at 1420 3rd Avenue. If you're interested in joining us, please see Dawn. And the Corner Bookstore is out there selling copies of our anthology and some other books, so please check them out. Do any of our members have any good news to share? Any good writing news from any of our members? Okay then. Well, then I would like to introduce our panel moderator, S.J. Rozan. S.J. Rozan's 18 novels and 80-plus short stories have won multiple awards, including the Edgar, Seamus, Anthony, Nero, and Macavity, and also the Japanese Maltese Falcon. She's been honored with Lifetime Achievement Awards from both the Private Eye Writers of America and the Short Mystery Fiction Society. Many of her stories have appeared in various best of collections, and she's edited 3 anthologies. And of course, she wrote the introduction to our anthology. So thank you so much, SJ. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you. Okay, this is working, right? I am a member here at the library, and if anybody wants to talk to me about the wonders of the library after this, I'd be happy to. I am also a sort of OG at Sisters in Crime. I was not one of the founders, but I go back so far that I was one of the members who joined in the first year. So that just, that was during the Pleistocene, and so that's, one of the reasons I'm here. And I also love New York, and everybody knows that. Oops, okay. So the way this is going to work, I'll introduce the panelists. I have a couple of questions for them, and then they will each read for a few minutes from their story in the anthology. And then you all can ask questions of all of us. And that is pretty much everything, unless somebody has, magic tricks they want to do or card tricks or something. Okay, so now of course, my little cheat sheet here is alphabetical, and they are not. But starting down at the end, over there, this is Nina Waxman. And she's a former art director and illustrator, author of 3 novels of historical suspense set in 17th century Venice. So that sounds like fun. The most recent, The Courtesan's Pirate, features a pirate's star-crossed romance with an elite courtesan of Venice. I wish I were there. Nancy. Nancy is next. Nancy Good is the best-selling author of the How to Love a Difficult Man series, which we all need to know right now. She has appeared on Oprah, CNN, Geraldo, and across the US and England. She also writes the Melanie Deming Manhattan Mystery Series, which includes Killer Calories and, because we're New Yorkers, Killer Condo. She's a lifelong resident of New York. As a pianist and singer, she's performed over 50 times with choirs in Carnegie Hall. All right. Susan Breen is the award-winning author of The Fiction Class and the Maggie Dove series. Her short stories have been published in Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, which you may know are the premier crime magazines that we have, and most recently the Anthony-winning Mystery Writers of America anthology, Crime Hits Home, edited by me. Which was interesting because I have to tell you, the stories were blind submissions. So I didn't know who had written her story until we chose it. She teaches novel writing at Gotham Writers and is on the staff of the New York Write to Pitch workshop. Where am I? Kathy Stoller, I'm looking around. Kathy Stoller is an Amazon best-selling author and Derringer winner for her short story, The Kaluki Kings of Queens. The Derringer is the award given by the Short Mystery Fiction Society. She writes the Nick Donahue Adventures and the Murder on the Rocks series, which include Bar None and Last Call, which was a Silver Falchion finalist for Best Suspense Novel. Two other books in that series, Straight Up and With a Twist, were both finalists for the Chanticleer Clue Book Awards. She also writes the Lauren and Helen New York Mysteries, a lot of New York mysteries going here, and has published over 20 short stories. She's a board member of New York Tri-State Sisters in Crime and a member of Mystery Writers of America and International Thriller Writers. And at the beginning of the alphabet, D.M. Barr is an award-winning author who writes psychological and romantic suspense and nonfiction under her own name, only it just says here D.M. Barr.
Dawn Barkley.
Dawn Barkley. I wasn't sure you wanted to admit to it. Her eight published books include Expired Listings, this is a New York real estate book, Murder Worth the Wait, and Saving Grace, a psychological thriller. Her newest release, Deadly When Disturbed, will come out from Level Best in January, which will also publish her upcoming multi-volume series, Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide. Is that really a true crime, like where all the true crimes happen? Oh my God. She was one of the co-editors of this anthology that we're here celebrating tonight. Okay, so my question to you all, my first question is, where in the state of New York did you set your story and why? Nina, let's start with you because you're all the way over there. Oh, you don't have a mic? There's many mics.
Okay, here we go. I set my story in New York City, which I've loved all my life. I grew up in the suburbs and started going to school in New York City when I was in high school, and basically refused to leave Manhattan after that. And I'm also a historical fiction reader and writer, and I really loved the Ziegfeld Follies. I'm a big classic movie lover, and if you've ever watched those movies, the Florence Ziegfeld story, Ziegfeld Girls, I saw them all, and I loved them. And that's what I always wanted, to write a story about the Ziegfeld Follies, so that's why I wrote Murder at the Ziegfeld Follies.
Thank you. Yeah, let's just go right down the line.
What the question was why it said.
The question was where and why.
Where? Right here in New York City. Actually, this short story is in Carnegie Hall. Why? Well, actually, something happened at Carnegie Hall while I was there. I not only sing there with the choruses, but I love to go to concerts there, and I was at a concert with Yuzha Wang, because I'm a pianist and I love to see pianists, and she was doing all of Rachmaninoff's concertos in one afternoon. So we went to see it, and I had great seats upstairs, and very much at the beginning, something happened to somebody in the audience, and she stopped playing, and that person was taken out. And she did resume the concert. That's not what happens in my short story. But I thought, this is I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I wrote this short story in Carnegie Hall. I know a lot about Carnegie Hall because when you sing there, you go upstairs in elevators, and I often thought to myself, great place for a mystery because nobody knows where you are half the time. You're wandering around these back hallways, and a lot could happen there. So that's why I said it where I said it, and I am also a lifelong New Yorker. I mean, I grew up on Long Island, but I've been here forever, and I love New York, what can I say?
Whoops. Okay, and I'm Susan Breen. I wrote my story, I set it in a suburb, in a little village, a little bit north of New York City. And I set it there because I'm fascinated by villages. I grew up on Long Island near Levittown, in just that sort of place where everything was anonymous. And I love the idea of a village where people have secrets and think that they know each other, but actually they don't. And there's just something intimate about it that draws me. So that's why I set it there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Stoller. I am a native New Yorker. I was born in the Bronx and then moved to Manhattan, and I never want to leave. No matter how many times my husband says, well, wouldn't you like to live somewhere else? It's like, no, never. Well, maybe Barcelona. But otherwise, so my story is about the theater, which I love and like to attend, and it's just sort of resonates with me when I think about that. So this has got a little bit of a not-so-nice theater person happening, but it's fun. So that's the where and the why.
I write as Deanne Barr, and my story is set in both Rockland County. I live in Rockland County, so I guess that means I have absolutely no imagination. And also in Buffalo, because I needed a city that had a major symphony orchestra that was about 4 hours away from Manhattan. 4 hours away from Rockland, because we have a very unethical psychologist who's traveling up there to supposedly save a life, but that's not exactly what happens.
I used to live in Buffalo, and it's rarely used, except by Joyce Carol Oates, who also was from there. So thank you. I talk a little bit about what it is about New York that attracts not just people, but crime. And anyone can start.
I'll start.
All right, Nina.
I think that New York is the place for entrepreneurs. You can do anything here. You can start anything there. And if you think about it, criminals are great entrepreneurs. They're breaking new ground. They're coming up with new ways to make money that isn't the usual course. And when I think back about some of the great, criminals from the bootlegging era, and like Waxy Gordon and all those guys, they were really unusual. And Arnold Rothstein, who I always love reading about. It's really interesting to me that they were all, they minted in New York, and there's a reason why,
Love it. Somebody else? Anybody? Go ahead, Nancy.
I don't think I can top that. That was great. I don't think about New York as being a place of crime. That's the interesting thing. I put all my books here, but I think of it as just a lot of creativity, tremendous excitement, and a lot of lives that we don't know about. I mean, there's so many millions of people, we don't know what's going on with any of them, or people who live on your floor, for instance. So there's, when I think about it, the last apartment I was in, the woman there, the place was filled with dummies because she created for the ballet, and it was basically a fire trap. So, you do. But things are going on behind doors that you don't know anything about. So, yeah, I can see that happening. But I don't think of New York as a place where there's a lot of crime. Just in my books.
I'm glad you said that because I don't think of New York as a place of crime either. But when I was a young woman and I lived on Madison Avenue, actually on 28th and Madison, someone did once break into my apartment and read my diary. That was probably a good omen. They didn't steal a diary, so I don't know. But anyway, that's been my main encounter with crime in New York. But
I want to know how you know they read your diary.
well, I can tell you because I assume it's a he. He smoked a cigarette and left a cigarette on my diary. So, like my first bad review. But yeah, I don't know. But anyway, it was a surprise. I can tell you to come back to your apartment when you're just 24, I guess, and to find that someone has been there. I don't think there was anything he could have stolen, actually. You know, now that I think about it, but anyway, I do think, though, that part of what draws me about writing about New York is that people tend to come from somewhere else, and everybody has a history, and you don't know what that is. And they can make up a history, and you don't know if that's true. So I guess that's part of what drives me is just going back to my whole village thing, the secrets that people have.
Well, I think in New York that anything is possible. And I think that's why a lot of people come here. And crime is very possible. You know, people, you don't always notice it. Sometimes I'll be walking and I'm a big eavesdropper, and I'll hear people say, well, I was going to do this and I was going to do that. And I'm thinking, oh, well, what if they are really going to do something else? And I just read a book where they talked about all the people that this man had gone to school with. They wanted to be a lawyer, and someone wanted to be a doctor. He knew what he wanted. He wanted to be a crook. And I just thought that was very funny that someone would know this from the very beginning of their life, that this was their calling. But in New York, you know, if you walk around, you just see every kind of person you can imagine. And they're not all honest. They're not all bad, but they're not really all honest. And I think that as writers, we draw our inspiration from things like that too.
Well, having written my second Vacations Can Be Murder book, which is New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, it was originally going to be 6 states, but it couldn't be because there was so much crime in New York that not only did I have to limit it to 3 states, but I had to cut out all of Western New York and just go from the Capital Region down to Long Island. And there was so much interesting crime, including cannibalism and infantoriums where kids were like thrown against walls and killed. I mean, it was horrific. So trust me, there is crime in New York, and I unfortunately know it all.
I have to tell my best eavesdropping story. I was at a flea market, you know, up in Columbus, and these 2 guys are walking around, and one of them picks up something and he says, hey, this is, you know, just exactly like the one Ma used to have. And then he turns to the other guy and says, and you said you'd send it to me when I got out of jail. Unfortunately, I don't know what it was. I didn't see it. But is that me? Am I making all those noises? Oh, you're throwing your microphone around. Okay. Well, good, because I was going to address you next anyway. You said there's no place you'd rather live except maybe Barcelona. Yeah. Is there a different kind of crime that you can think of from the kind of crime you write about that takes place in New York? And I'd like you all to kind of take a think about this.
Well, there's, sort of corporate crime. I think there's a lot of that with banks and things like that, which I'm sort of writing about sometimes. But mostly, I think, for me, I write about murder or like thievery or, that kind of crime. I don't know what other kind of crime. I mean, graft, corruption.
Something particularly Barcelona-ish.
Oh, Barcelona-ish?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't encountered any crime there when I've been there, which is why I would like to live. I mean, it's a beautiful place. I'm sure it's the same kind of thing that we have here. There's all different kinds of people that do all different kinds of things.
The only other place I would like to live is London, but London is the source of so many mysteries. I mean, England is such a fabulous place to have a crime, so I can't imagine that they have less crime there than New York, but maybe they do. I was going to say real estate. You can always find crime in real estate, and that's why I wrote Killer Condo, because I knew a lot about real estate in New York, and a lot of people that I wanted to poke fun at. So that's why I got, and the real estate market was big for me, and that's what Killer Condo was about. But London's the other place I would go.
I'm writing a book that features London right now. The whole thing is taking place there, and it's about art crime. So, sure we have that here too. I don't think we hear about it that much here, but this is a big deal kind of art crime.
Well, I write about Venice, and Venice in the time period that I wrote about, and I guess for a couple of centuries, was known as the capital of poison. So if you wanted to kill somebody all across Europe, you went to Venice to buy your poison, because they really, and what's interesting is women were behind a lot of the poisons. They concocted them because in Venice, unlike other countries, if your husband died, you inherited their estate. So there was really good incentive to poison your husband. But I think it's different in New York, and one of the things that I just learned, because I just read a book about Mae West, who lived in my building at one time, and what was interesting is she was in an early movie, I don't know if any of you have seen it, where it starts out, she's like a con woman, and she goes up to immigrants, new immigrants, and asks them if they want to buy the Brooklyn Bridge and charges them something. And you know how we always say, yeah, I got a bridge I'll sell you in Brooklyn, right? Well, that really was a con, a scam that went on in the turn of a century, that these Russian immigrants would come here trying to make a living, and the locals would scam them and say, here, you can buy Brooklyn Bridge and think of all the tolls you collect, and it was a big scam. So I think New Yorkers are known for scams and cons like that, and that creativity of really doing something like that was amazing.
I write mostly murder. I really like writing about murder, and it has nothing to do with my husband, really. But I would like to write about fraud and con men. Most of my books, or 3 of my books, are set at Rock Canyon Realty, so there's a lot of interesting parts of the real estate industry, because I am a realtor, that you can sort of uncover and exploit. But I find also the techno thrillers are really interesting, and the fact that you can find out what somebody's doing by subpoenaing their Alexa or their refrigerator and things like that. I find that really interesting, how investigations are going.
It's a terrifying thought that somebody might subpoena my refrigerator. Who has not answered this?
I did write a short story set in London, and it was called Detective Anne Boleyn. And so I drew on, I guess that's something you can do in London, is you can draw on historical characters. And I also, Anne Boleyn did not know, but sort of had something to do with Catherine de' Medici, and learned, they never actually met, I think, but it's possible. Anyway, that's a whole other thing, except to say that she knew a lot, Anne Boleyn knew a lot about poison, and that became an important part of the story. So I do think London can inspire you to come up with stories that might not really have taken place.
In the book I'm writing that's set in London, it's really all about a long con, which I really had to research because I didn't really know very much about how to set one up, but now I do. And it can take a year to set these up, and everybody has to do their part and be in their place at the right time, and it's very interesting in and of itself as something to know.
I hope you were using a VPN as you did your research.
I think that I went onto the British MI5 and MI6 sites so many times. I said to my husband, if they come and like look for me, they'll know. I'm a writer. That's okay.
Oh yeah.
You can't get a job though unless you are a British citizen and you've lived there for at least 9 years.
Yeah, they all say that. I'm a writer. It was research, right? And one more question, speaking of being a writer and its research, and then we'll get to the readings. You all know, I'd say that is not true. A couple of you have said that your civilian career helps inspire your books. You're a real estate agent and so on. Can you give us an example of the kind of thing you know that you might not know if you were not in that business?
Yeah. In expired listings, a lot of people don't realize that if you overprice your home, nobody's coming to look at it. And so I had a killer who took a victim and tied them to a hot water heater in a house that was overpriced, and they died of thirst. Because I love irony. So they died of thirst because no one would show the house because it was overpriced.
You're really a lot weirder than I thought.
I really am.
I've known you for a long time.
Well, on the real estate, I had a license here in New York City for a while, and just all the characters I came across was really some unscrupulous, some just annoying and unpleasant. But there's a lot that can go on in real estate in New York, and it's very pricey. Pricey and deadly. That's what this killer condo is about. So it's about very pricey real estate. What was the other thing? Oh, but I spend a lot of time in rehearsals, so it's either in any place from Radio City to churches. Churches are amazing. I mean, churches have the most little tiny alcoves. They're always silent. You have to go upstairs someplace to find a bathroom. I mean, churches immediately make me think about murder. And one of my short story in the other anthology, the anthology 2 years ago, I guess, was it? That takes place in an East Side church, actually, where I have to go to rehearsal after this. So, and every time I'm there, I'm thinking, and nobody's around when I'm leaving. It's like, uh-oh.
Anyone else? Your civilian?
Well, I was an advertising creative director, copywriter, and I worked on a lot of fashion accounts. So I kind of weave that into my stories sometimes, what they're wearing and if it's important. But advertising could be, I think, a stepping stone for a lot of mystery things, but I don't use it that much.
I'm also a psychotherapist, so and I kind of know after all these years a little bit about how people think, so that kind of helps.
Susan?
My Maggie Dove mystery series is set in a church, and the Maggie Dove is a Sunday school teacher, and though she becomes a detective. But I do think a thing about churches is that they bring in all sorts of different people from all over. So, and of course, people are not always at their best at a church, and so, though sometimes they are, and hopefully they solve the mystery. But anyway, it's a place where people feel strong passions, so that's a good setting for mystery.
Nina?
So I'm a little different than the bunch here because I went to art school. I was in advertising as well, but when I was in art school, we learned about different eras of painting and the different techniques that different eras used for paintings. Like some in the old masters would paint their canvases black and paint from dark to light, whereas the Impressionists would paint their canvases white and go from light to dark. So different things like that, and that came into my first novel, which is called The Gallery of Beauties, which was about an artist who was commissioned to paint the portraits of the 12 most beautiful women in Venice, and then one by one they're poisoned. Obviously in Venice, poisoned. But the interesting thing was that it was one of my characters who's the subject of the painting. When she's painted by him, she wants to understand how he does portraiture. It's a real, and I think that a lot of people had, and I did when I was in art school, this almost like, what is that inspiration that gets that, is there a mystical connection between the subject and the painter? So that's something I explored. And it turned out in my research, the Gallery of Beauties, I found out that this was a real thing, that monarchs had galleries of beauties. They had portraits painted of beautiful women in a gallery in their palace. And the one I had seen was in Munich in Nymphenburg Palace. And it was by Ludwig I, and he had all the most beautiful women of Munich painted for his palace. Then I went to Hampton Court Palace, which I'd been to many times, and lo and behold, now I knew this, I found there are two galleries of beauties in Hampton Court Palace. One is in the downstairs and was done by William I. After Mary died, he had his wife, who he loved, he had the portraits of all the noblewomen of court painted all around this one study where he'd go to, and it would give him solace. And then on the upper galleries, they have the portrait gallery of Charles II, of all his mistresses, and they have a very different look and a very different purpose. So, and then I found, and Louis XIV also had a gallery of beauty, so that was very interesting to me to see this kind of technique that I learned about, and then find out that this was actually a custom of those times.
Thank you. Okay. I think it's time for the readings, and I think we can start with Weird Dawn over here. DM Barr will read to us. You're reading from the beginning of your story?
Yes.
Okay, and the name of the story is?
It's called Orchestral Removals in the Dark. So a little play on orchestral maneuvers in the dark. And I am reading from the beginning. The doorbell announced the arrival of my newest patient. I checked my monitor, the black and white screen reflecting a gangly 13-year-old boy with short brown hair, pulling at his wool sweater while staring into his phone. Beside him, his hovering mother was dressed a bit too provocatively for a psychologist appointment. Not that I minded the view afforded by a shirt revealing more cleavage than, quote, suburban mom appropriate. Ever since the newspaper feature on Rockland's most eligible therapists, I'd grown accustomed to it. I watched as the two sat on opposite sides of the waiting room and then gave them a few minutes to relax. Dr. Davis. The woman leapt to her feet when I finally opened the office door and walked toward her. I'm Gloria McQueen, and this is Benjamin. I'm so glad you're accepting new patients and could squeeze us into your schedule. Her eyes were earnest, but the word squeeze made me picture her in a less maternal role. Well, you said it was important. Your last therapist retired without notice. He left us high and dry, I'm afraid. Well, luckily, your call coincided with a last-minute cancellation. I handed her a clipboard holding a blank patient intake form and a pen. Why don't you come in, Ben, and we'll have a chat. In the meantime, Mrs. McQueen, could you please fill out this questionnaire for my files? She took the clipboard, but the boy kept his eyes on his phone. It's Benjamin, he said with a flat affect. Of course, my mistake. Benjamin, won't you please join me? He rose, reluctantly. Will you need me to fill in any gaps, any information your form might not cover? Asked Gloria, a hopeful glint in her eye. I was used to the euphemisms. When you're in your 40s, with money, the respect of your peers, and what the newspaper article described as rakish good looks, it came with the territory. Maybe later, I said, appreciative of the opening, so to speak. There was something so familiar about her. Her hair, her eyes. Gloria, have we met before? She blushed. I'm sure I would have remembered that. It's possible I was confusing her with some of my past encounters. So many patients and patients' mothers, so little time. My mistake. Let me talk to Benjamin first, and if necessary, you can join us later. Fair enough? Of course, said Gloria, slumping back into her chair. Benjamin glumly trod into my office and plopped himself down onto an overstuffed leather recliner, where he continued to scroll through his cell phone messages. I didn't take it personally. Teenagers were naturally uncommunicative, even more so when coupled with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. Unless you knew the secret to drawing them out. I opened my notebook and smiled, though both actions were lost on a patient now glued to his Bubble Pop app. So Benjamin, let's forget about the intake interview. Would you like to tell me about your hobbies? Many patients with high-functioning ASD often fixated on obscure topics to the exclusion of everything else. Few outsiders had the patience to listen to their endless trivia. Those who did earned a special place in a patient's heart. Benjamin tentatively peered up from his screen. Mom doesn't like me to talk about it. She says it makes me look odd. Your mother isn't here right now, and I won't tell if you don't. Benjamin looked past me, another ASD trait, and his eyes lit up with the excitement of a right-swipe Tinder hopeful. You mean it? Of course. Have you heard of doctor-patient confidentiality? Kinda. It means that I'm ethically bound to keep anything you say secret. Are we good? He nodded hesitantly. Great. So what is it that keeps you busy when you're not in school? Tracking the murders, mostly. I knew I must have heard him wrong. Say that again? The orchestra murders. Don't feel bad about knowing about them. No one really has uncovered the pattern except for the 5 symphonistas. My stomach fell as I realized Benjamin might be suffering from more than just ASD. Hallucinations and delusions were symptoms of many other syndromes, including schizophrenia. Back up, buddy. Can you tell me about the symphonieces and why you think anyone's been killed? Benjamin deflated like a week-old Mylar balloon. I knew you wouldn't believe me, he muttered as his shoulders hunched and he stared back into his phone. I didn't say that. Tell me everything, from the beginning. Please, I really want to understand. His desire to share overruled any momentary disappointment. Benjamin again looked up and stared at a point at the wall to the left of my ear. The Symphonistas are Bradley McLean from Chicago, Dennis Peralta from San Francisco, Alex Fisher from Omaha, Ron Masterson from Fort Lauderdale, and me, he rattled off. We met on an autism support group on Facebook and discovered we all shared an interest in classical music. Well, that all sounds fine. Where does murder come in? Well, first, the bass clarinetist from the Alabama Symphony Orchestra disappeared, he said in a matter-of-fact tone. That was a little over 7 years ago. Then 6 months afterward, the Arkansas Symphony lost their bass drummer, and so on. It's all based on a complex algorithm Ron uncovered, too complicated to explain to a mere civilian. Understood, I murmured. The disappearances always happen after the first evening performance played at home 6 months after the last. The bodies never show up. I did some quick math. You were tracking orchestras when you were 6? Nah, I'm the latecomer to the group. Ron is 30. He noticed the pattern first. We're up to New York, and the next victim should disappear this week, the flautist from the Buffalo Philharmonic. Benjamin's love of patterns did not surprise me. It was a classic ASD trait. I was just shocked that he and his friends had uncovered a series of homicides that had eluded the notice of the authorities. Then again, different states, different law enforcement offices, and if no bodies had shown up. Benjamin, are the victims usually men or women? A combination. So far it's even. This month will break the tie. And if no bodies have surfaced, what makes you think that anyone's been murdered? And you'll have to read the book to hear the rest.
It's a good book, too.
So my story is called Another Opening, Another Show. My protagonist is a successful writer in the middle of his latest novel, and he's developed writer's block. The story he's writing features Archie Beck, who is trying to infiltrate a Middle East terrorist group. So my protagonist is staring at the cursor when his cell phone rings. Thank you.
Stay close.
I tapped answer, but never got a chance to say hello. The overenthusiastic voice on the other end was in rapid-fire, full-volume mode. It was Buzzy Berkeley, my agent. I always suspected he'd stolen his name from the famous director and choreographer, Busby Berkeley, and tweaked it a little. Buzzy was a shark, but in a good way, as long as he was your shark. He always looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion spread in GQ. I could envision him sitting at his desk behind his laptop, Tom Ford black silk suit, black square frame glasses, black and gold crocodile bracelet, and wireless earbuds firmly in place. All of this was belied by his voice, which sounded old school agency, booming, strident, and nonstop. Are you sitting down? I hope you are, because I have something incredible to tell you. All this came out in one long streak that would read in 72-point capital letters like a headline in the New York Post. I shook my head at the phone and tried to speak. Buzzy was all I got out before I was cut off. He continued as if he hadn't heard me or was ignoring me, which he often did. Like I said, incredible. He waited about a half second, which, believe me, was a long pause for him, then got going again. You know that last book of yours, the one where Archie tracks down that Ponzi scheme guy and gets back all the money? I did know it, and so did he. It was called Man on the Run. It had been a bestseller, then a blockbuster summer film. What about it, I asked, wary something was wrong. Well, the actor who starred in your movie, Thomas Phillip, he's interested in taking it further. Further, I asked, as in a sequel? Not exactly. He wants to option the story for Broadway. This is your lucky day, can you believe it? Actually, I couldn't. Man on the Run was a complicated, action-packed thriller, more suited for the screen than a stage. Sure, book to movie to play had been done before. Harry Potter had found the magic formula, not to mention Shakespeare. Then there was King Kong. It had been expensive to produce, closed much earlier than expected, and at a loss. Like King Kong, Man on the Run was filled with locations that included the ocean, the mountains, the desert, big cities, several continents, planes, boats, and trains, for starters. Archie had tracked the Bernie Madoff-like character on all those conveyances through all those disparate places, and finally captured him in the Cayman Islands. He also got back most of the money, as well as the woman the villain had abandoned, who had been played by the gorgeous redhead, Sienna Martell. Philip was a box office draw. Why would he want to be in a Broadway play? I couldn't help wondering what his motivation was. Maybe he thought it would legitimize his acting, or he wanted him to stroke his ego. And where was he going to get the money to finance the play, which would run into the tens of millions? Then it came to me. He was jealous. Jealous of his female co-star in Man on the Run, Martell. She'd just been signed to star in the latest Disney Broadway extravaganza, which was almost guaranteed to be a box office smash. The two had hated each other on sight, and getting them to look like they even had an ounce of chemistry between them had nearly pushed the movie's director over the edge. Thomas complained about every scene Martell was in and made a big fuss about redoing every one. From what I'd heard, Martell was just as spiteful, either blowing her lines on purpose or stepping on his anytime she got the chance. I started to laugh. Philip didn't know what he was in for. It wouldn't be take after take until he got it perfect. It would be live, every night for as long as the run of the show. It could wind up being more like a disaster than revenge. "Why are you laughing?" Buzzy asked. "Never mind," he said in disgust. "Just be here tomorrow at 2 p.m. We're going to take a meeting with this actor and its producers." Then Buzzy was gone, and I was wondering what the hell had just happened. So you'll have to read the book to find out what happens.
Buzzy Berkeley, how could you not love it?
Okay, I'm reading from my short story, One Woman Watch, which is about a woman who lives in a small village north of New York City. Every night she patrols her neighborhood looking in windows. As you can imagine, this is irritating to her neighbors, but it's desperately important to her to make sure everything is okay and her neighbors are safe. If she sees anything suspicious, she calls the police. Then, one night, Jane Hanover walks by the largest house on her block and sees this. Biggest house on the block, shaped like a ship with little portholes for windows, an aggressive smack in the face to our colonial-style neighborhood. Even the flower bed is unappealing. Ugly stalks that shoot upwards like pikes. A shiny Maserati in the driveway. Judy Flint drives around like a lunatic. I've had to jump out of her way more than once. That's when I notice a face in the basement window, a young woman. I blink. Is it possible? She's got her hands up against the window. She's screaming. For a moment, I'm so shocked I can't move, but then I run to the window, pound my hands against it, but it won't open. She's collapsed to the floor, not moving. I grab my phone, fingers shaking so badly I can barely press in 911, but I make the call. Then I rush to the front door and try to find the bell, which is hidden under some iron decoration. Can't get my finger in, start banging on the door until finally Judy Flint opens it. She has on a silk robe and tons of moisturizer, glistens like an alien. "What is it?" she says. I try to dart around her. No time for explanations, but she grabs my arm. She's strong. "What's happening? What are you doing?" "Something's happening in your basement. Someone's getting hurt." I try to tug out of her grip, but I can't. Scan the room, trying to figure out how I would even get to the basement, which way to run. There's hardly any furniture. It's like being in a football field, acres of stripped oak flooring. "Let go of me," I shout. "There's a girl in your basement, and someone's hurting her." "You're the freak who looks in everyone's windows," she says. "I just read an article about you." "Please, she looks like she's hurt. Do you have a daughter? Could she be in trouble?" Just then her husband runs down the stairs. He's tugging up his pants, chest bare, cheeks flushed. "What is this racket?" His voice is gentler than his wife's, but his expression is just as severe. A daughter. Judy Flint laughs as though I'd told a joke. Do we have a daughter? At that moment, there's a firm knock on the door. Finally, the police are here. At the sight of me, Officer Bergeron sighs, but at least he listens. I saw a woman being attacked in their basement, I said. How do I get to your basement, Mr. Flint? Flint points toward a hallway. That way, but there's no one there. Officer Bergeron starts in that direction, not running precisely, but walking fast. I'll come with you, I call out. But he chops his hand, not even looking back at me. No. Judy Flint lets go of my arm, but she stands close enough that I feel confident she will prevent me from moving. And so I stand there in the living room, which I guess is what it is. No signs of living, no signs of life. Perfectly arranged furniture with no cushions. Must be expensive. She takes out her phone and begins talking to someone and telling them about a crazy lady who showed up at her house. It's as though I'm invisible. I try to force myself to remember what I saw in case I'm called upon to testify, but beyond the fact that she was screaming, I didn't see anything. Blonde hair, panicked eyes. My mind crashes to a different blonde girl. Not the night of my daughter's murder, but a night months before, when we'd had a fight about her decision to move to Manhattan. We'd not always got along. That last argument has haunted me even more than her death. If only I could take those words back. Don't call me if you get into trouble. Then Officer Bergeron is back. Everything's okay. Sorry about this, folks. He puts his hand on my back and propels me toward the front door. What's happened? You need an ambulance? We'll talk about it outside, he says. Come on, Miss Hanover. I'll give you a lift home. He guides me into the police cruiser. It smells of air freshener. What happened, I asked. He shrugs. What do you mean? There was no one there. That's impossible. Whoops, did you check the window for fingerprints? What about blood spatter? You've been watching CSI. Her hands were pressed against the window. I saw her. It was not a hallucination. He pulls into the driveway. My house is small compared to the other ones on the street. Never remodeled. A starter home, though. Now, thanks to the influx of people like the Flints, it's worth 4 times what we paid for it. Whoever buys it will tear it down and put up a mansion. Reading my mind, he says, have you considered moving away, going to Florida, starting over? He belches and smells of pizza. I must have interrupted his dinner. My husband moved to Florida, married a new wife, has new children. He sighs again. I seem to cause him great pain. Ms. Hanover, have you ever heard of the boy who cried wolf? Yes, I have. And do you know what people get wrong about that story? That the boy actually did see a wolf, and they didn't help him. You've got to leave your neighbors alone, Miss Hanover. Sooner or later, someone's going to press harassment charges. You could find yourself in trouble. A street light forms a neat circle of light over my mailbox. Looks a bit like a halo. You think I'm worried about trouble? If there is one advantage to surviving the worst thing it's possible to survive, it's that it's left me fearless. What does it matter to me if I annoy people? They could throw me in jail and I wouldn't care. In fact, with all the rage there is boiling inside me, there might be something exhilarating about winding up in a jail cell with strong steel bars to bang my head against.
So this is from Too Much Beethoven, the plot of which you've heard a little bit already. Hello, Jennifer, Madeline Stuckey said tersely. She clicked past us, 4-inch heels and clingy red dress. She's on the board here, my husband muttered to me. Madeline Stuckey was an ultra-rich parent at our son's school who was as stiff as her name. Madeline continued to the orchestra seats. We joined the throng up in the cheaper box seats high above the stage, where we could look down at the piano keyboard and the orchestra already on the stage. Leopold von Herschog, the piano soloist, was a rock star to classical piano fans. The audience buzzed with excitement as we waited him to hear him play all 5 of Beethoven's concertos in the same afternoon. At that moment, von Herschog strode out wearing twinkly black shoes with bright red soles, Louis Vuitton $1,000 a pair, and shiny black trousers. The 2,800 fans cheered and roared. Von Herschog bowed, nodded to the conductor, and they began with Concerto No. 2, not No. 1. Herschog pounded Beethoven's impossibly hard chords with a tremendous sound. His fingers shattering excellent runs were stunning. Thank you, whatever happened. Through the first movement, suddenly a woman shouted. Von Herschog abruptly stopped playing. I had never seen anyone do that before, and looked towards the woman. Leaning way over the railing with Paul grabbing my arm, that's her husband, I saw a man slumped over the side of his seat in the left orchestra, maybe 15 rows from the stage. His female companion frantically yelled, "He's not breathing, help!" 2 ushers, a male audience member, then a woman jumped up and ran into the row. They gave the slumped man CPR, one pounding on his chest. People all over the hall stood up to get a better look, like a drive-by accident on a highway. Some milled about, changing rows to get closer. 2 wore baseball caps, not usual Carnegie Hall style. I took out my phone with its zoom lens. This was a once-in-a-lifetime event. I'd been to Carnegie over 100 times, sometimes with the chorus, sometimes to watch. Concerts never stopped. It seemed indecent for audience members to walk through rows to get a better look, yet there I was, snapping away on my phone. I got lost in the drama of filming CPR and thought, as I often did, I should take a class. After a few minutes, the EMTs arrived with an oxygen tank and clamped a mask on the unfortunate man. A heavy-set, dark-haired guy in his 40s sat directly behind this collapsed patron, shifting uncomfortably. His jacket was on his lap. He moved it behind him, then he put it on. His shoulders were twitching against the dark fabric. This medical emergency was making him nervous. The EMTs put the man on a gurney. I couldn't see if he was conscious or not. They wheeled him out of the hall, followed by his companion. She whimpered loudly. A few people with coats in hand also left. The 2 guys in the baseball caps departed. Not die-hard music lovers. Suddenly, I noticed the seat behind the ill man was empty. The hefty guy was gone. The loudspeaker announced, "The gentleman has been revived and is on his way to the hospital. We will continue in a few minutes." The audience cheered. "Well, that's 2 free seats in the orchestra," the gray-haired woman next to me said. "Several, actually." I pointed to the empty seat behind the ill audience member. Typical New Yorkers, finding a bargain in a bad situation. After a few minutes, von Herschog strode back to the piano, and the orchestra resumed playing. The hall grew silent, swept along by the power of the second concerto. Suddenly, agitated, raised voices again. "What the hell?" Paul muttered under his breath. My heart pounded. I couldn't tell if it was from excitement or fear. "What now, a jewel heist?" I asked. Paul and I laughed. The man next to us gave us a disapproving look. I couldn't see where the noise came from, but this time von Herschog kept playing, and ushers walked to the center section near the back. The voices got louder, angrier. The conductor threw down his baton, stopped, and whirled around. "If you are here to listen to Beethoven, there has to be silence. Please remove those who are causing this interruption." The usher rapidly walked to the stage. The conductor came to the front and kneeled. A moment later, a man in a blue suit walked onto the stage and made an announcement. "It appears a few patrons are missing pocketbooks and wallets. Could everyone please check their belongings?" This concert had turned into a Law and Order episode. More audience members started for the exits. "When you leave, you will have your bags examined by security. The police are here," the man on stage announced. Von Herschog was doing his best to remain calm, but his lips were tight. Okay, we're going to skip along here. I heard a commotion at a side door outside the hall. A thought suddenly occurred to me. "I'll be back," I said to Paul. "What? Jennifer, don't get involved. Stay here." "Oh, no, of course I won't get involved." I lied. "I'm going to the bathroom." I passed the bathroom and started downstairs. There were others trooping up and down the stairs, too. No one paid any attention to me. The drama was too engrossing in the orchestra. Snooping is a bad habit of mine, and I knew my way around Carnegie Hall. A possible crime at this iconic venue was just too tempting. My bad habit took over. At the orchestra level, I got out and walked down the side hallway. I saw that antsy man who sat behind the audience member walk into the bar. He was just where I thought he'd be. I followed him into the bar. He ordered a drink. I stood behind him. He answered a call on his phone. "Yes, it worked. Don't keep calling me." "What worked?" My phone buzzed. I knew it was my husband. I ignored it. The antsy guy was still on his phone. I couldn't believe he didn't mention me anywhere in the program. Such a coward. Right, you knew he wouldn't. He had on his long-suffering face. I heard an accent when he spoke, Russian or Czech, somewhere in the Eastern Bloc. He ran his hand through his thick, dark, curly hair. His shoulders twitched. The tension was like an electric wire. He said you should have seen his face. Whose face? I could hear the applause from the hall as von Herschog finished the first concerto. The hefty Russian, as I now labeled him, sat at a small counter with a beer. He put his large leather briefcase on the chair next to him. It appeared to be crammed full. I got a Perrier and pretended to look for someone. "That's crazy in there today. You a Beethoven fan, too?" Chatty, light, two strangers killing time. He sighed. "I am a fan, as you say, of all music." "Really? Me too. I sing in choruses. You?" "I am an overworked, underpaid concert pianist who coaches." He took a long swallow of his beer. I knew there was something. I mumbled to myself. He looked up at me sharply. "What did you say?" he said. My stomach clenched. "No, nothing. Just that something always happens at these concerts." He seemed to calm down. His phone buzzed. Again, he turned away from me and rummaged in his briefcase. "Stop calling me. I'll let you know," was all I heard. I peeked at his bag, left wide open, and saw a shimmering black shirt and a red bow tie. I guess he was going out to dinner later? In my best amateur sleuth mode, I took a picture of the contents. I noticed a sharp metal point of something sticking out from a pair of black socks, and there were music scores that all said Beethoven. I couldn't get close enough to know which pieces they were. He got off his phone. I slid mine in my pocket. He seemed agitated and shut his bag with an angry snap. "Have you noticed that concerts don't go smoothly and seats are too expensive? Can't imagine what von Herschog gets paid." I smiled innocently. $75,000. "Since it's an extended concert," he muttered into his beer. "Wow, that's a lot. What's your name? Would I know you?" He shook his head. "Do you know von Herschog? His concentration must be affected." A slight sneer appeared. "We've met. I'm a professor and a coach. I go to many concerts." "Really? You must have performed too, I suppose." His face hardened. "There are choices that have to be made in a music career if one has people to support. Then there are those born with a silver spoon." He took another swallow of beer. Von Herschog looked like a silver spoon kind of guy. I said as much. He looked at me suspiciously. My comment was way too direct. "Aren't you concerned you're missing the concert?" I still didn't know his name. "The thefts and that man collapsing," I shivered, and it all wasn't for effect. I had to get out of there. I leaned forward as if we were best friends. "Do you think some random pickpocket just happened to be in the audience and took advantage of the medical emergency?" He took a step away and shouldered his bag. "Of course, what are you implying?" "I think it's obvious, don't you? The whole thing was staged. I read mysteries and watch a lot of series." He looked shocked. "That's outrageous. How could the two things be connected?" I think I've gone on too long. Right? I think we're done. Okay. Anyway, thank you. We'll stop there. There's more.
I read mysteries and watch a lot of series. I love it.
Hi. As I mentioned, I like old movies, and I still watch those YouTube snippets of the Ziegfeld Follies movies, particularly like there was one with Lana Turner and Hedy Lamarr, where they played Ziegfeld girls. And if you recall, in those movies, they'd be in these amazingly beautiful costumes, glittery, and like in tableaus where they wouldn't be allowed to move, but they would all be color coordinated. So I'm reading you the scene of the murder, and it's in one of those tableaus, but the murder weapon is very unusual. Okay. There were 3 stage sets like mine, tableaus for summer, spring, and fall. Just by luck, I got winter and had to wear fur under hot lights. Dolores also wanted fall, since the red and gold color scheme would go well with her red hair. "Quiet, everyone," the stage manager shouted. "Curtain up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. On his cue, the thick red curtain rose and the spotlight shone on the array of beautiful Follies girls posed on each step of a large white staircase. Our tableau was set way back in the shadows, so no one could see Dolores breaking off pieces of banana and shoving them in her mouth. She stuffed the banana peel deep into her muff. Every girl knew the rules. During the show, we are no more than statues, and we're supposed to stay absolutely still, no matter what. We can only move when and how we are instructed to, such as when the spotlight was shining on Dickie as he sang to us. Any other movement would lead to dismissal. Mr. Ziegfeld was strict about that. Unlike Dolores and me, Magda was allowed to turn towards Dickie and give him her hand as he sang to her. In my tableau, I was leaning over the sleigh and had to keep my back straight and my chin up. Dolores was lucky. At least she was sitting spotlight on, pose, smile, on. Out of the spotlight, I was allowed to stretch and shake the pins and needles out of my poor feet. Then the finale, when each tableau would be illuminated in order, fall, winter, spring, and summer, before the show would end and the curtain would fall. Dickie, in black tie and tails, was dancing across the stage, and the tableaus would be revealed next. The stage manager was going to cue winter, and the spotlight would illuminate us. I took a quick look at Dolores to see how she was faring, and was surprised to see her head tipped back and her mouth open. Could she have fallen asleep? She'd be out fast if Mr. Ziegfeld saw her like this. I inched my fingers forward to reach and pinch Dolores's knee. No reaction. What was wrong with her? Dickie was posed against the white steps below our tableau, tap dancing in time to the music. I already had a wide-mouthed smile plastered across my face when our tableau was hit with bright light. Under the heat of the spotlight and the fur hat, it was a wonder the sweat wasn't running down my forehead to spoil my eye makeup. I risked another glance at Dolores, and my breath caught as I struggled not to scream. A small black spider was crawling out of the white fur muff across Dolores's white satin-covered lap and was heading towards my hand. It was feeling its way tentatively, its multiple thin black legs stark against the white satin. Closer, closer, those black legs moved, but it did not seem like it could get a good grasp on the slippery satin. Though it was moving slowly, it was gaining ground, and I had to gulp to keep the scream from bursting from my throat. If I let it out, my career as a Follies girl was cooked. A scream would ruin the show, and that was an act never to be forgiven by Mr. Ziegfeld. Though I didn't move my body, my eyes followed the spider's progress. The spider was now at the edge of the sleigh, close to the tip of one of my fingers. I jerked my fingers away, praying the sudden movement was not noticed by Ziegfeld. Luckily, it did catch Dickie's attention. He was leaning across the sleigh, crooning at me, and must have seen the spider, its creeping body bold black against the white satin. Still singing, Dickie twirled his walking stick and spun it round so quickly to quickly flick the spider off Dolores's lap. With a frozen smile, I exhaled deeply while Dickie grinned before waltzing away towards the spring tableau. The spotlight followed Dickie as he departed, shifting our winter tableau into shadow. I could move again. Immediately, I reached over to squeeze Dolores's hand, but her fingers did not press back. Though it was dim away from the spotlight, the whites of Dolores's eyes shone, with no interruption of blinking. Nausea and lightheadedness were overtaking me. Don't faint, don't faint. Taking deep breaths, I steadied myself. Dolores did not seem to be alive. There was nothing to be done for Dolores anymore. The show was not over yet, and the finale was still to come. I had to stay still. Taking deep breaths was my only way to keep my panic under control until the show was over. I tried to make sense of what had happened. How could Dolores suddenly die? She wasn't sick or anything. That spider, it must have bitten her. Maybe Dolores was allergic, like those people who die from bee stings. Where did that spider come from? From the set, perhaps, which had been pushed against the wall and lay deep in shadow all day until the show? On the set, the sleigh was painted all white. Before Dolores sat down, shouldn't she have seen the black spider against all that whiteness? It certainly stuck out when I saw it crawl from the muff across the white satin dress. Wait, I saw it come from the muff. How did it get inside? That muff was in the dressing room until Dolores grabbed it right before the show. Were there spiders in the dressing room? That's what it is.
I guess poison is poison no matter who delivers it.
Thank you so much.
Are we done? Okay.
So,
Please buy the book. The book is out there.
Exactly.